Taylor Walker from the Adelaide Crows, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Shannon Hurn from the West Coast Eagles.
This is Nathan Jones from the Melbourne Football Club.
Phil Davis from the GWS Giants.
It's Brad Avery from the Port Adelaide Football Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Let's talk about the number 46 player in the 50 most relevant for 2019. Hello, MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you're doing well. I hope January's treating you nicely. And your pre-season for fantasy footy is tracking along. To help me talk about one of the big name recruits from the off-season, I thought I should get a Tigers supporter on board. So I got Jimmy back. Hello, mate. How are you?
Hey, I'm much better, mate. You brought me on a couple of nights ago for a Bomber and then last night for a Carlton player. I think it was about time we put the foot down and brought in someone good. So here we go. Let's talk about old mate Tom Lynch.
Let the bias fly early, ladies and gentlemen. But it's with good reason. Look, he's 26 years old. A phenomenal tall forward when he's fit and firing. But he can score. Even though 2018 wasn't a great year for him from a fantasy perspective and from a health perspective, this guy's got some ceiling. 139 was his best last year in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team. That was against the Blues. In that same game was his best Supercoach score, 180. Yeah, I know it's Carlton, but you still don't get 180 without being a darn good footballer. And that's what he delivered.
I just want to quickly interject on that too. Guess who he plays in round one this year?
Oh, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that, don't you worry. His average last year across all formats was down considerably. Just the 67.1 in AFL Fantasy Dream Team, 78.4 in Supercoach. So he's priced at, yes, what he averaged, but he's priced at considerably less than what he has done historically. It just wasn't a good year for him. Despite our entering into the year, relatively fit and firing. About 6 weeks into the year, the Gold Coast coach, Stewie Dew, came out and said, look, he's been battling a knee injury. He actually had a sore ankle from playing a couple of games at Optus Stadium. I don't know if you remember earlier in the year, Jimmy, there was some complaints that maybe the ground was a little bit firm as the kind of curators were, kind of learning the ground and getting a very much in the, fine shape that it's in now, not just for football, but for all sports. But he spent a couple of weeks away getting his body right again, and he did play the next kind of couple of months, month or so, round 11 to 14 he played. But after that, the decision was made. Sent him away for surgery on his PCL, and that was it for him for the year, but also as a son. Look, a couple of 80s in there across the format, and that big score against Carlton. But really, 2018 was a year of disappointment and frustration for Tom Lynch, let alone for fantasy coaches that jumped on him, because there were promising signs in his career that he was going to be a top 10 forward.
Oh, absolutely. But at least, as we know now, his year finished on a high note and he got traded to Richmond. And
Here we go.
Look, I think there is a lot to like here. As you say, he's scoring, and people forget how, and people forget very quickly sometimes, I think, just how well he can score from time to time. And you look at him and go, like we were talking about with Danaher the other night, he's a key forward. You don't pick key forwards unless they're buddy. But when he's scoring the way that he does, with the sort of consistency that he can, he will have the odd poor game, but you take that with the 180 that he gets as well, and it works out all right, I think, just quietly.
Oh, I think so too. Let's jump to his best season in fantasy footy. 2016, he averaged 86 in Dream Team and Fantasy that year. And he managed to go 80 or more in 16 matches. 7 of those were hundreds, and he went on 2 really impressive scoring runs that year. Between round 1 to 5, he averaged 101 with a lowest of 81. And then in his final 11 games of the season, he had just the 1 score below 80, and he averaged 93.5 in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team. This is from a guy who right now is averaged, in terms of his price, in the high 60s. So you're looking at names like Stephen Motlop, Rory Lobb, and his fellow new teammate, Shane Edwards, are in that similar pricing range. Yet he's done, in big chunks of seasons, high 90s in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team. For Supercoach, it gets better. It gets better. During that year, in 2016, he averaged 93, which is awesome enough as it is. He scored north of 90 in 13 matches. 9 of them were tons. 4 of them were big 120-plus scores. And in those same run of games, round 1 to 5, he averaged 105 with a lowest score of 71, while in his final 11 games of the year, he only dropped his score below 82 just once, and he averaged 101. If Tom Lynch gets anywhere near those numbers based on what he's priced at, it's a really hard decision to choose to pass on him rather than to start on him.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I'm trying not to let my bias come into this too much. And it is a hard thing because I liked him before he came to the Tigers, and now I'm just head over heels. But you look at, just for comparison's sake, those numbers you spoke about there in his 2016 season at Gold Coast. His 2019 season is going to be at Richmond. He's, again, as we spoke about with Danaher the other night, his quality and quantity of supply to the forward line should be a little better than it was then.
Fair call.
I'd imagine. And not only that, with the 2 new rules this year designed for forwards to kick more goals with the 6-6-6 setup, and the forwards being allowed to put hands in the back of defenders now, both of those things are going to make him a very hard man to stop one-on-one in the forward line. And you think, clearances haven't been Richmond's strongest point over the last couple of years, fair to admit, but any time that the ball can get in there quickly, he's going to be very hard to stop from kicking goals, and kicking goals is where he's going to get a lot of points this year.
There was such a great reason for why Richmond went after him, because he is, in my opinion, one of the best key forwards in the game. And because we haven't seen him as much due to injury of the past 12 months, and then before that, out of sight, out of mind at Gold Coast, make no mistake about it, Tom Lynch is one of the best forwards in the game, and he's had great fantasy seasons as well. Yes, 2016 was a ripper, but between 2014 and 17, his lowest Supercoach average was 83, with that peak of 93, while in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team, a peak of 86, but his lowest was 75. So even just off, kind of hedge your bets and go in the middle there of his best and his worst, he's still presenting 10, 15, 20 points per game value for you. So there's huge value here. Take in then the fact, the quality of players that are around him. He did have some very good players at Gold Coast. Make no mistake about it. Take in the new rule readjustments that have come in that do play to some taller players, having some benefits. This guy's a jet. He's a fierce competitor. He will work tirelessly on the lead. He's not just a stay inside 50 guy. He'll work his way up and down the ground because he's like 200 centimeters or, a centimeter or 2 away, a kilo or 2 away, from being 100 kegs. He's hard to beat in a contest, body on body, got a great reach about him. And then for a dude that's basically, the 200-100 combo in terms of centimeters and kilos, this guy will add ground pressure. He's not just going to stand there and let the likes of Rioli, Butler, Bolton do all the work. He's going to play his part in that as well. And then top it off, he's a fantastic human being and a brilliant leader. So I think, some of those things aren't
the Tiger supporter here, man.
Yeah, I know.
I enjoyed that. I'll be listening to this podcast again and again and again, and not just for the sound of my own voice. That was beautiful poetry by you just now. All
right. Well, let's say something that's a little bit negative. No, it's not. There is a real reason why Richmond went after him. And Tiger fans have known it for a couple of years, and it got exposed in the preliminary final against Collingwood. And, for the past 18 months, 2 years, Richmond have kind of snuck away with it. But they really have been lacking with some tall forward options outside of Jack Riewoldt. It really got exposed on that preliminary final night where the talls of Collingwood were able to just intercept, peel off. There was so much other things that didn't go right for Richmond that night, but it really kind of was emphasised as they were bombing the ball in long, trying to get out of the pressure. And it was just double and triple teaming Jack Riewoldt. Tom Lynch now becomes the best key forward in that side, freeing up Jack Riewoldt. What a crazy thought that is. So that's one of the key reasons why Richmond have gone after Tom, is because he's such a great forward. Yes, it's planning for a future without Jack, but it's also adding for, at least from a non-Tigers perspective, probably what's been one of the Achilles heels of the club that finally got exposed. But gosh, it took a while to expose it.
Oh, that's it. And we got ours in the meantime, so I can't be too mad. But,
No, exactly.
Look, I think in all seriousness, though, looking at him from a value point of view, looking at his potential and his possibility of what he can score based on what he has and based on what we know about 2019 season, where he is and what the rules will be compared to what he's had to work with before. I feel that there is a lot of value and a lot of potential there for him to become in Supercoach especially, in that upper, potential top 10 to 15 bracket of forward comfortably. And at the price that he's at, that is a huge advantage. And even if he doesn't quite get there, the value that he offers, given his price to his probable output, and I do say that with inverted commas, that to me makes excellent sense. From a dream team, and prices haven't been released for fantasy, but I imagine so there as well, but there is a little less fat on the bone. So you are banking on what I've been saying before being accurate in that increased output. He is close to 500,000 in Dream Team there. Is there enough meat on that bone if he doesn't become a top 10 forward? It is questionable.
Yeah.
So if you are picking him, I think you're picking him with that hope or expectation that he does. In Supercoach, though, I think it's a very strong bet and definitely worth a very, very careful consideration. Yeah,
he's shown he can do it before in all formats, but most evident in Supercoach, and that's where you can have the most confidence. How the rules, impact Tom Lynch, we're yet to really see in full. That's what the JLT is going to be huge. And, fantasy websites and podcasts just like ours, we could all have egg on our face very, very easily, with all these calls and comments, because there are some major rule impacts that are coming in that could help and hinder people's fantasy impacts. How does Richmond's game style evolve, with him inside 50? It's going to have to adapt to some capacity. I don't think it's going to hinder their scoring potential or Lynch's fantasy output. But, these are the questions that, that are great to converse about and to process and to think about. The thing you mentioned right at the top was two things that I'm interested about. One, I know plenty of coaches have the no key position player rule except Buddy, but I think when you do that, you lose the potential of what Tom could be. He's arguably the biggest player that moved sides in the preseason, and in Supercoach more than anywhere else, you can build a case from being right on the edge of a top 10 averaging forward for the price of considerably less. The second thing is I think Tom's made to play at the MCG. He said that was the main reason he'd left the Gold Coast Suns. It was, I want to play finals and I want to play at the G. He loves to play on the big stage. He's missed that as a part of his life. He's wanted to play in finals. These things are going to happen at Richmond. And then the greatest news of all is he plays round 1 against Carlton. In 3 of his past 4 games, in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team, 3 of his past 4, there's one stinker in there, full disclosure. 3 of his past 4 have been 139, 132, and 123. In Supercoach, oh, my friends, it gets better. Same 3 out of 4, 112, 161, 180. I could see some fantasy coaches getting rewarded on that Thursday night game going for Tom Lynch.
Well, you could just about put a sneaky VC on him that night, couldn't you?
I would be if I had him, that's for sure.
Oh, yes, very nice.
All right, fair enough. Let's talk about where we're going to draft Tom Lynch. I feel like some of these guys, especially in the 40s, are really hard to place because they are relevant, but there's reasons why they're positioned where they are. On potential, again, he's, as we've said a few times this episode, he could push that top 10 to 15 across formats. More Supercoach than others, but he could push that. And because of that, you may get a bullish Jimmy, Richmond fan drafting him a little bit early. But because of his injury-interrupted season and probably a down year as a whole, I think you won't have to pay up for him unless you've got a couple of Tiger fans in the league. So I think you're always going to get some bias there. But gosh, if you could pick him as an F4, that's a huge win. I think F3 is a bit more realistic. So he becomes someone that's not a top 10 draft selection in terms of rounds, but, round 11, 12, 13, depending on size of squads and numbers of coaches in, he could be there because you could be picking up an F4 with the value pick of an F2 in return.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And what and I hinted on this when we were talking about Danaher is again, Lynch is a perfect option for that type of forward to fill your gaps in a draft league if you decide to focus on other lines first. And if you use your first 10 picks trying to pick 3 quality defenders, 4 or 5 gun mids, and a decent ruck, get a forward somewhere along the way where you can, and then you're coming into your rounds 12, 13, 14, 15, and you're picking up guys like a Lynch and a Danaher and these types who should be, in theory, good for a solid 75-ish, but could also push to 95 and have that ceiling to do the 120 pluses from time to time. That's not a bad strategy, I think, to be going into a draft with, personally.
It's something we're going to talk about a whole heap here at the Coaches Panel right throughout the pre-season. And that is that there are so many different strategies you can look to go to and ways to approach the draft. And then when things happen in draft, how you can be fluid in those moments to ensure that, yes, you've got to have a plan, but the plan's got to be so mobile that if things change, you've got to be adaptable because, you could build a value forward line with the likes of just guys we've spoken about already, Danaher and Lynch, and you're paying, 60s average in terms of where they're being ranked, but you could get a high 80s, 90s return. Like, what a massive win for you, and equally as likely you don't get that. But it all depends on the strategy that you go for.
It takes one bastard to pick him one pick before yours, and suddenly your whole strategy goes out the window. So
exactly,
you've got to be adaptable. One thing I would mention, though, is Lynch is one of those players, too, that if I'm in a keeper league and I don't already own him, I'd be going hard.
Now's the time.
He starts. Yeah. Now is the time to go for him. Because the guy that's got him is probably sick of him not playing and is more than likely remembering the average scores rather than the good ones.
Yep.
And you should be able to pick him up a lot cheaper than he's worth.
Yeah, and there has been some talk that, he had a bit of clean-out surgery as well, out through November, December, and it isn't quite yet back into full training, and that's not uncommon for players too, to not be in full training at this point of the pre-season. But, if you're a keeper league owner, I love having forwards that I think have huge ceiling and scoring potential, but also that you're not going to have to be like, they're a midfielder 1 year, they're a forward the next year, midfielder for 2 years. It's so hard. I think the benefit of you do is maybe sacrifice some scoring ceiling. What you do though is you get a guaranteed forward in your side. So guys like Lynch, you're going, if he's fit and firing, I can't see a planet he's not scoring 80 plus, in terms of seasonal average in any format. And that's a huge thing that you can bank on. And I agree. If I was in a keeper league and the owner wasn't a Tigers supporter, go after him. Don't go too hard because they'll realise what you're up to. They're like, why is he going after him so much? There's some value here. But if you can jag him, I think he's going to return massive value for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, very keen.
All right, man. Appreciate your thoughts today on Tom Lynch.
Happy to, mate. Always happy to talk Tigers.
Yeah, I thought you would be, mate. Of course, if you want to check out the article of me gushing a little bit on Tom Lynch too, you can check that out at coachespanel.tv. You can get all the details to support us at our Patreon and all the links you need to be able to go back and check through every single player that has been revealed so far. And a new article series as we go club by club, looking at all these players that we think if there was a player from a side you were going to lock in, who is it going to be? Who's a breakout potential? Some draft smokies, a cash cow, a breakout option. You could go and check that out from a number of members of the Coaches Panel. Those articles dropping every couple of days. You can find that too at coachespanel.tv. One of my most favourite players to watch in the entirety of the AFL lands at number 45. I'll give you a clue about him at 9 o'clock Eastern Daylight Savings Time, but that's a pretty good clue. Actually, that narrows it down to about 85.